Welcome to the Chase Down Podcast, part of the Cavs Media family. I'm your host, Justin Rowan. The Chase Down is presented by Fubo TV. Watch over 100 channels of live sports and TV for half the cost of cable. There's no contract and no commitment. Try for free at FuboTV.com. The offseason just keeps rolling on, and you know what? There's no transactions to talk about, no moves for the Cavs. So we're going to start with some team previews. We are going to interview some of our favorite people from around the league with other top teams in the Eastern Conference. But before we get to our interesting guest that has tons of insightful things to say, we have Carter. Carter, how you doing, buddy?
This is Garrett Temple erasure. No transactions.
That's true. Toronto's got a veteran leader. Yeah, let's just go long on that.
They added shooting on the wing.
Yeah.
Come on, brother.
They desperately
Dare I
needed some
say
shooting.
they're back?
You know what? He might even run the point guard position.
He's probably the most qualified on the roster right now.
Scotty Barnes erasure. I hate it. But we're not here to talk about that. Thank you, Carter, for getting us off track. Today, we are joined by one of my absolute favorite guests for the Chase Down. From the Gyro Step podcast network, Ti Windisch. Welcome back to the program. Ti, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great now that I'm back on the prestigious, illustrious Chase Down podcast. Before Carter pointed out Garrett Temple, who I think of a tweet this summer that just said Garrett Temple failed when all the Zion stuff was coming out. That's the first thing I think about with Garrett Temple. But you also overlooking Thanasis. I don't know if he's officially re-signed yet, but reportedly coming back to the Bucks. I think that was a day or two ago as well. So a lot of huge earth-shattering moves. Who cares about this Dame stuff? We got Garrett Temple and Thanasis Antetokounmpo news. That's what the people really want.
That's what gets the people going.
I saw Shams reported other teams like the Knicks were in the mix for him. So, you know, good for the Bucks to retain players. And really, that was a theme for the Milwaukee Bucks this offseason overall. You know, a lot of speculation that guys might be on the way out. But before we get to that, before we get to the offseason, I think we as a collective here need to kind of reminisce on the playoffs and the second round matchup that never was, because you and I were messaging at the time, doing a little bit of planning like, hey, you know what? In all likelihood, we're going to be doing a lot of content second round Milwaukee Bucks. You know, you're planning ahead, and it just didn't work out for either of us. Does that disappointment still linger for you? Because I don't think I'm fully over it.
Absolutely. I mean, any season when you have Giannis, and he missed some games in the first round, whatever, you still had prime Giannis on the roster. It's not like he was out for the playoffs, which would have, it would have been worse. Like I'd be less happy if he had that serious of an injury, but it would have been more explainable than what happened. So yeah, it's certainly still really disappointing. I think getting the excitement of the coaching search and bringing in the new coach and, making some small moves, although as you kind of alluded to, and we'll get into, mostly standing pat this summer, but really bringing in the new coach and apparently some new schemes. I think that excitement kind of takes over. But looking back, I've said it's one of the top two disappointing Bucks playoff runs in this Giannis era. I think the bubble is the bubble. The Toronto series, of course, also hurts a lot. Like last year, if you're going to lose in the first two rounds, losing to Boston in 7 without your second best player, that's kind of how you would draw up like the least disappointing way to go out in the playoffs. It still sucks, but it's like, okay, sure, that'll happen. This past year, though, that was brutal. So no, not quite over it yet. Although at least we have other stuff to distract us with in the, the fun, the roster moves, everything else going on.
I feel like it was kind of a weird year where all these teams that were favored to win their series or were the higher seed lost, and it almost like diluted how much crap the teams took nationally. I feel like the Bucks have gotten functionally no heat for their loss to the Heat, at least nationally.
Ty's making the face because we are all so acutely aware of the
I know, but
exactly.
I feel like every Cavs fan is more mad at the Cavs than the national media is. I feel like every Bucks fan is more mad at the Bucks. I probably feel like every Grizzlies fan is more mad at the Grizzlies. Up and down for these teams that lost that series that maybe they should have won. I think the only fan base that of the high seed that isn't miserable with how their postseason ended was the Kings, in terms of teams that, lost to a lower seeded team. So I don't know. It's such a weird thing. And does the fact that the Heat made the finals, is that a salve on the wound a little bit? Or does it also just suck because you're like, well, that should have just been us going to the finals?
No, I think it worked as a solve because, Bucks fans aren't as mad at the Bucks. I will say, I think it's more it's like the universe. Because it's like, really, Jimmy Butler's going to do that? And you look at Jimmy Butler was good the rest of the playoffs. There's like a clear difference. I know he banged the ankle up against the Knicks, but obviously goes on to play 4 playoff rounds. Was not that guy. I mean, we were watching the rest of the playoffs, and they kept winning, which did make it better. Because it's like, okay, this zombie team is clear. It's not just the Bucks like falling apart, although they did. It's also like they keep grinding it out, like they know how to do this. But obviously the Cavs inherited one of the players who really helped them do that. But it's more like, really, Jimmy Butler's going to be Kawhi Leonard, because he was like Kawhi. He was 2019 Kawhi for that series. Like, it was insane. It was like, to a certain extent, they needed to make more adjustments, all this stuff. Like, again, I really don't want to be the Bucks guy who just is like, oh yeah, the Bucks were perfect. They didn't. No, they messed up a lot. They needed to make some changes. Hopefully they've made enough. But also, like, what can you do if Jimmy's just going to make every shot against Drew Holiday? Like, we don't have a lot of counters for that. No team has a lot of counters for that. He was otherworldly good. I mean, Caleb Martin almost won Eastern Finals MVP. That Heat team just had something in the water.
That lob shot was one of the most insane that I've seen that Jimmy did. Like, it just didn't make any sense. And you're right. Like, it's funny looking back at it. He didn't have 4 rounds of playing like that either, right? Like, you could tell kind of age is catching up to him, those Tibbs miles that he's got on his body. He wasn't that guy in the Eastern Conference Finals. He wasn't that guy in the NBA Finals. And I do, like, echoing what Carter said, I feel like a lot of the top teams in the East kind of beat themselves, and Miami's that team that won't, right? Like, they refuse not to. They force you into those mistakes, and I was really interested to kind of get your perspective of that series because, like you said, even though Giannis missing time obviously was a major factor, he wasn't 100%, it still felt like a missed opportunity and a year where I really thought that Milwaukee had a great chance to win the championship. Do you feel like that there was kind of a championship left on the table here due to the variety of circumstances, or did the way they lost make you think, hey, maybe they weren't as infallible, maybe they weren't as mentally prepared for this particular run as they could have been, and that would have cost them in the end?
I never feel like, a championship was left on the table because there was so much more basketball to be played. And I think Miami matches up better with Boston than maybe anybody. So, Boston, I think now at this point, a lot of Bucks fans think they're a bit of a boogeyman. I don't go that far. I think it's I think it's kind of a good matchup for both teams. I'll be really interested to see this year without Smart how Boston goes about defending some Bucks, especially Giannis. But save that for a different 2-team preview podcast to dive into. But no, I mean it's more like just a better run, like a run squandered. Like I try not to look at it ever as, oh, if this happens different, it's a title. Whether it's last year with Chris getting hurt, because again, there's so much more to be played. Even 2019, a lot of Bucks fans sit on that one, almost up 3-0 against Toronto. Obviously, what happens to Katie and Clay. But you replay that again in a different universe. Maybe those guys are healthy, and the Warriors just
that one haunts
to another
me.
one. Yeah,
I can see Carter wants to talk, but I just have to add that one haunts me because Giannis in that game 3 not getting a single free throw in regulation, I still curse Scott Foster's name.
It was a weird thing at the end of Siakam. It kind of went off him at the end, and it was Raptors ball. And we for some reason, I know you guys. I think I actually tell people all the time. You guys did an amazing job finding content. During COVID when everything was off, not the bubble, but before it. To pass the time during that, we rewatched every game of that playoff run. I don't know why. We didn't have fun, my co-host Rohan Kadi and I. But rewatching that game, you're like, oh my God, so much happened in this game that you just kind of pack away, right? Like, oh, that's over. And rewatching, it's like, oh my, it was so close to being up 3-0, but here I go again, getting hysterical. But they have Giannis and Chris and everyone. They can go on more runs, and I try not to hold too tight to the misses. We're lucky enough to have gotten one, and that's really special, as you guys I'm sure can relate to as well.
We absolutely can. I wanted to ask you about kind of a big talking point that came out about the Bucks playoff roster construction, because I think everyone really liked this Bucks roster. Going into that postseason, they liked a lot, almost every player up and down the roster, and then the playoffs start, and you go, There's not a ton of athleticism out here. They kind of seem old and slow and crafty. And it kind of made me think of the end of the first LeBron era in Cleveland when the Cavs had really surrounded LeBron with a ton of high skill veterans that, then you would go and play a team like the Lakers, and Lamar Odom would just like run them off the floor. Do you feel like maybe the Bucks maybe over-indexed a little bit on that with their roster construction, where it's like, hey, we have 8-9 guys who can be trusted to make the right decision and play smart defense and shoot the ball, and oh wait, they're just faster and can jump higher than us, except Giannis.
Yeah, I think that was a big part of it, and I think that it kind of doubled down on Giannis's injury being problematic, because when he got back, he didn't have that same burst either. But I think it was kind of a twofold problem in that they didn't have enough athletes, and also there was. This is going to sound stupid. They were almost too deep in that there's probably 11 players on that team who should have gotten rotational minutes. And in the playoffs, that can be a difficult thing to figure out, like, okay, which 7 or 8 actually get them. And it means
I'll tell you what, it sounds like a great problem to have based on how the Cavs
that's what I said
was.
too. That's what I said too going in. And then Jay Crowder plays 40 minutes over 5 games and looks bad, and you just can't play him anymore after looking great in the regular season. And Javon Carter, kind of the same deal, quietly did not have a good playoffs. And when you have that level of expectations and that kind of roster, there's not a whole lot of time to figure it out. And you can't just give a guy 20 minutes a certain night because it's just not working. So I think that, coupled with the athleticism, was a double detriment in that they had these vets who, they know how to play, but they don't have that same level of bounce, and they're not getting enough minutes to get acclimated, to get totally comfortable out there. Neither are the players around them. They looked off. Watching that series, the funny thing about that series, maybe funny to Heat fans, like game 3, I remember watching it. I was like, yeah, they're cooked. They're not going to win this game. Like, Giannis can come back. They're not going to win this series. Like, something's just wrong. And you could really see it. Like, they didn't have the same level of fight. They weren't as competitive as they should be, even when someone goes down, even when Giannis misses time. So I do think whether it's, Malik Beasley, whatever, he can, obviously not a defender, but, certainly younger and more athletic than the guy, Joe Ingles, Wesley Matthews, some of the guys they were trotting out last season. Certainly, if Marjon Beauchamp can earn some minutes, I mean,
I'm a stockholder.
I'm
a stockholder.
Yeah. Big fan.
Just dropped 83 points in the crossover, baby. So that's like, I don't know, dropping 30
What's
at
the
some
conversion
rate.
rate?
I don't know the conversion. Yeah, I don't know the conversion. It's got to be at least 15 in a regular
Imagine
season
being
game,
his
though.
teammate in that pro-am run. It's like, come on, man.
We call that a CEBL 40.
Yeah, CEBL 40. We'll take that. But had some really good summer league games too. Had some quiet ones as well. But I kind of said, listen, anytime you have to spend 5 days in Vegas in a row, like, you're not going to be performing the same. Like that it creeps up on you. So I understood that from Marjon. But seeing those guys get real opportunities, which they didn't. I mean, Marjon was year 1, a non-lotto pick. You're not going to get that much run on a good team. But now he's had more time to develop. It seems like they're pretty high on him. They drafted 2 really athletic rookies, and a former Bucks front office staffer actually posted, I think on Twitter, X, whatever, these would not have been draft picks when Bud was there. Like, it just, everyone had to shoot, everyone needed those skills, and having shooters around Giannis is really important, of course. But I do think they went too far away from athleticism in how they assembled the roster. And I am really excited to see, like, what maybe they can have an actual good transition offense if Giannis has some running mates. This is something that Bucks Twitter was kind of befuddled by. They weren't good in transition last year. Like, they didn't score a lot. And it's like, well, yeah, half the roster or more is very old and not fast. It's going to be tough even when you have Giannis, because you only have one guy getting down court. So I think very excited to see some more athleticism on the court this season.
Yeah, obviously one of the biggest changes is with the coaching staff, right? With Budenholzer no longer being there. Were you happy with the direction that Milwaukee went with their coaching hire? Because I was happy for you guys. I'm not the biggest fan of Nick Nurse and him kind of being in the rumors and whatnot. And you went with the Toronto coach, just a different one than the rumors would have indicated. Were you happy with that decision?
Yeah, I was. I mean, I think certainly didn't expect it. Didn't expect Adrian Griffin, a Dr. Adrian Griffin, recently earned, I believe, to make the top three, much less actually get the job. Really just thought it would be someone who was a coach before. So I was a little worried it would be Nurse just for that reason, just for the clear selling point of like, oh, he won a title as a coach. He's got what it takes, whatever that means. And I just thought they would go with someone established. I really like Kenny Atkinson going in. I thought, kind of getting more seasoning from that first job in Brooklyn and the player development. I thought he would make a lot of sense. Obviously, they didn't go that direction. I think, though, what was exciting was someone who's been around the league for a long time and seems like he just really can relate and connect with players. I think that's one of his major strengths so far, and really a defensive-minded coach. And I love what he and the organization did in, bringing in Terry Stotts and bringing in Joe Prunty and some of these other coaches, and pretty openly being like, yeah, Terry Stotts and Joe Prunty are going to have a lot to say in cooking up this offense. I think being able to recognize that you have a deficit in something and then just bring in the right kind of expert. I mean, Terry Stotts, in addition to his time in Portland, was the offensive coordinator, whatever the title is in the NBA, for the 2011 Mavericks. This is a guy who knows building great offenses very well. I think bringing in those guys really reassured me a lot, because if there is any question mark with really any Raptors coach, right, it would probably be offense over the last several years. I mean, the player development there, the defense certainly there, the offense, not an ideal roster, but also not a very good offense anyway. And they will tell you they have 5-6 All-NBA players over there in Toronto. So there should be a better offense than we've seen out of the Raptors in these last several years since Kawhi. So, yeah, I'm excited. I think that they needed to change. Something was just off. And it was very unfortunate. We found out afterward that Mike Budenholzer's brother passed away during the playoffs. I think that certainly had an effect on him. But the Bucks offense had just been stale for a little bit too long, the adjustments. And it seemed like there was a little bit of, there was more discord, I think, between the players and the coaching staff than we thought. And some reports came out. And, one of those comes out and you can kind of hand wave it away, but multiple, and then hearing Giannis really wanted to find the right coach to connect with, I think you can kind of connect some dots and see, maybe the team, that message just wasn't resonating the same. They needed a new voice. I think it's hard to fire a guy who won a title 2 years ago, but I think it was the right move. And I'm very excited to see what Adrian Griffin can do this year for the Bucks.
Yeah, I mean, it goes to show you just how important that buy-in is for players, right? Carter, you were about to say something?
No, I mean, I was about to say as much. It kind of feels like they saw the Darvin Ham experiment go well in LA last year. After a rocky start, obviously, but after that roster came together, Ham, who had been an assistant for a really, really long time, that was beloved by the players they coached. It kind of you can kind of see the through lines there. In terms of. And
sorry, just quickly, Ham in particular, I mean, Bobby Portis called out after the loss. People didn't realize how impactful it was losing him as the Bucks lead assistant, that voice. And I think, again, just more signs that the team, I don't think was necessarily clicking on the same level. But yeah, Darvin, I think someone that Bucks fans love. I mean, there were certainly a lot of posts during dire parts, even the postseason they won it all, that, let's get Darvin in the lead chair for the next game. So yeah, I think he, for multiple reasons, Ham has a lot to do with this move.
Yeah, it's part of why I feel looking at where the Cavs came up short in the postseason, there were just so many points of failure across the board. There were so many things individually the players could have done better. There were things that we would have liked to have seen done differently from JB Bickerstaff, whether it's, bringing Allen that far beyond the 3-point line, going a little too far or going away from their identity a little too quickly. I thought they were trying to adjust to what the Knicks were doing rather than forcing the Knicks to adjust to them. But when you hear, Chris Fedor had a great interview with Darius Garland that was posted today, and when you hear the players talk, there's still that kind of unanimous buy-in, right? That they all believe they're all pulling in the same direction. And when you hear interviews with JB, it's always, it's a collaboration, right? You're working with the players. You're trying to identify, okay, are we all pulling in the same direction? Are we all working towards the same goals and getting their input? And I definitely feel like the Cavs are still on that path. And you never know, right? The 12 months ago, Donovan Mitchell wasn't even on this roster, right? So much can change. But right now it feels like, you know what? We addressed some of the concerns that we had in terms of personnel, adding a lot of shooting. You hear Garland talk about adding strength and being ready for the physicality of the playoffs. I'm very, very excited to see kind of what the offseason changes mean for the Cavs. But I'm also looking around the Eastern Conference, and I don't know if I'm in the minority with this sentiment, but I don't love what Boston did this offseason. Like
I'm
think
with you.
I think hate what Boston did.
Okay, so I'm not in the minority, at least not in this podcast.
Not in this podcast. The first move terrified me. I will say that. I'll get my finger in frame. The first trade that didn't happen, I was like, oh no, I don't like this at all for the rest of the league. And then that fell through and they traded. I was like, oh, okay, take all the second round picks. I don't care about that. Whew.
Yeah, I'm in the exact same boat as you. I thought that made sense to move Brogdon, but smart. That's a locker room leader. That's one of their primary organizers for a team that was short of organization. I think that's why they haven't won the championship the last 2 years, is they didn't have that playmaking. Then, losing Grant Williams, I think that hurts them as well, for a guy that's, struggled to be a number 2 option, played very well with Bradley Beal, largely out of the lineup last year for Washington as the lead guy. I just don't love what they did. Philadelphia, it looks like they are probably going to get worse. There's so much dysfunction. Daryl Morey's talking about, it's not going to look great in training camp, but wait until like middle of the season. That rarely works out in the NBA, especially when you have such a competitive conference. Knicks, I think, they're still kind of treading water, but that's still a good team. They're going to have a full year of Josh Hart in all likelihood. Adding DiVincenzo, I think they got better. But it doesn't feel like outside of like the Cavs, and I guess we'll see what happens with the Heat, nobody got better in ways that really move the needle. But does that make you feel better about Milwaukee kind of bringing back Middleton and Brook Lopez, where it's like nobody really raised the standard of excellence here in the Eastern Conference? There's no massive star addition that we now have to contend with. And we can just kind of bring back our guys, make some tweaks to the system, and learn from the playoff shortcoming. Does that make you feel better about the way that the Bucks approach the offseason?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I've tried to make this point before, and fans never want to hear it, right? But like, just saying we brought in Chris Middleton and Brook Lopez for 30 teams, that's a great summer in the NBA. And just because they were already on the Bucks, I know it makes it feel less impressive. But ask Toronto how much they would have liked to just retain their guys in free agency, and how much. And I don't mean to keep bringing back to the Raptors, but like, it's a big deal. And both of those guys were unrestricted. It's not like this is, they deserve a cookie because they matched an offer sheet or whatever. Like
I
the
thought
Lakers,
one was gone. I thought Brook at least was gone, and I was feeling great about that.
It seemed like it was a lot closer than we had anticipated. And at that point, we're scrounging through, like, can Thomas Bryant start for the Bucks? And he ends up going to the Heat for minimum, I believe. But, it got desperate. And I think, and I want to get back to Brook later, because like looking at these two teams, like just that center who is like truly a 3-and-D center, it's such a rare player in the league. And like how badly the Bucks or any team could use that guy, but especially a team like the Bucks and the Cavs, who have a player like Mobley in the front court who isn't the best shooter. I'm not comparing Mobley and Giannis directly, but in terms of like a big four who can work around the paint and could use some spacing, but also could use that rim protector for a lot of the time on defense, that player like Brook is invaluable. And that was extremely scary. So I think getting Chris for whatever, $34 million a year, I think, sure, absolutely, sign me up. Only having to do 3 years for the Bucks. I think it's really good. And then retaining Brook Lopez, who I really did consider that Houston bag, clearly got a bag from the Bucks, has been playing under market value for 5 years.
It's not an outrageous bag.
No,
though.
It's not crazy. When Siakam and Vucevic both got like 20-ish million per, I was like, he's probably going to get more now. I mean, that's
you mean Portal, right?
Siakam? What did I say? Siakam? Sorry.
Yeah, you said Siakam. Siakam would be taking a hell of a pay cut. I know he reportedly wants to stay in Toronto, but I don't think it's for that kind of money.
Not going to do that much. Yes, Pirtle and Vucevic, excuse me. But when they both got 20 million annual, I was like, Brook's probably going to get more now. And he did. And good for Brook. He earned it. He was second in DPOI voting last year. So yeah, I think, and certainly looking around, like the super team forming, being out west, it's like, whenever that happens, I'm like, sure. It's not Brooklyn anymore. Somehow they never won one, which is still pretty wild considering the talent they had there. Maybe Phoenix will, maybe they won't. A lot of the same questions, even though it's different players, apply there. But certainly, like, not having Beal or someone get added to like the Celtics is a good thing. Not having the Celtics being on Dame, even though they probably could, without giving up their two guys, a good thing, I think, for the East. And we'll see. If he goes to Miami, that's going to be a scary team. It hasn't happened yet, and they've let 2 starters walk already. So we'll see what happens there. Kind of a secretly precarious position for them, even though, you know, the Heat reporters will tell you they're fine. It's all good. It's handled. It's whatever. But yeah, I think the Bucks mostly running it back, but getting younger and having actual young players on the roster, which may sound silly, but it just hasn't happened very often. I mean, that's just not something they did on the actual NBA roster, really at all.
It's hard to do when you're trying to win titles.
It is, and it's easy to not do, especially when, you know, you can load up on the Corvers and Forbeses and all these guys and just have them and not really use them. I mean, last year, Myers, Leonard, and Gordon Dragic, like, sure, I guess, emergency depth. I like, though, having 3 players on rookie contracts, and they just signed AJ Green to a 1-year deal too, just like some real prospects who could develop. The Bucks just haven't really done that. They haven't drafted much. They haven't developed very much. They've more been a second draft team, which is great. You do need guys who can play, but it does make it a little unsustainable. You do get unathletic and old. So I think being able to kind of shift the roster to be a little more sustainable while also keeping the players who I think really matter, retaining your top 7, that's a pretty good summer for me, especially as you mentioned, the rest of the East didn't make that huge move yet. Maybe Miami will. We'll see. But they're just going to be a totally different team, maybe not necessarily a clearly better team.
Yeah, I mean, the reality here is, like, when you're a team like Milwaukee with title aspirations, talent drain is a real danger because you're an over-the-cap team pretty much no matter what because of how many other good players are on the roster. So, like, you just can't let talent walk. And, like, the one thing about retaining your guys is even if you do need to, like, make some kind of big blow it up type of trade to change things up, you just need as many pieces, as many you know, chips to play as you can have. What is the pick outlook like for Milwaukee right now? Like, I know they sent out a lot of capital, maybe more than I was comfortable with at the time for Jrue Holiday. Like, are they going to be able to try to swing for some, like, you know, legitimate upgrades mid-season?
I don't think mid-season. I think they'll be quieter mid-season. We maybe see like another Crowder kind of thing where they send out some seconds. I think next draft, though, they'll have to duck under the second apron, which they're a little over it this year. I don't think it'll be difficult. They'll have to duck under it for next year so they don't get the pick frozen in this insanely anti-teams trying to win CBA that we're in now for some reason. But they can trade 3 picks at the draft. So the guy they draft and then 29 and 31. So you're looking at, okay, you can actually make a real swing with that now, especially as you mentioned, you know, you're probably, if it's someone making a decent amount, you're sending out real players. And again, I don't want to do the biased homerism thing. I think that everyone the Bucks have under contract is at least like a slightly net positive. I don't think you look at, there's no deal where you're just like, oh, that's dead bloated money. Like someone like the Grayson Allens, Pat
I was
Connaughton's,
about to say
Bobby
Grayson Allen
Portis's.
kind of feels like the poster child there, where it's like, yeah, I mean,
it's
he's
fine.
probably going to play for anywhere he goes.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe
I'll still call you a homer just to be the one that calls you a
that's
homer.
fair.
But
That's totally
proceed.
fair. You know, it's just like, it almost hurt them this year because, you know, all these players are basically kind of being given away, right? Your John Collins, I think, you know, the Wizards, who'd they give away to the Pistons? I get their point guards confused. It wasn't Tyus, right? It was Monty Morris. Because,
that's right.
Because these teams just like either have cap space or an exception or just like we don't care about this $11 million. The Bucks don't have that. Like they don't have like, you know, there was so much, ironically, Colin Sexton buzz around the Bucks. It's like, you got to give up 2 rotation players to get him. And the Jazz probably want stuff on top of that. It gets kind of expensive. So it's almost been an issue this summer where teams kind of wanting to shed payroll were really just giving away players. The Bucks couldn't take anyone for free. But I do think when you look at, we're trying to trade for a real player like around the draft or next offseason, then it's like, okay, you're going to get plus value contracts, whether it's a huge swing, one of their star players, or some of the role players. And we have 3 firsts, and we have whatever seconds are left after John Horst sends out 15 more for, you know, the next 7th guy or whatever whatever the Bucks do at the deadline this year.
Was there an aspect of this offseason that you found to be a bit disappointing, or something that you were hoping that the Bucks were going to be able to accomplish that they haven't yet? I guess it's worth noting that the offseason isn't over, but I think most of the major dominoes have fallen, at least for our 2 teams.
Yeah, I mean, with only a two-way spot open, certainly it's not going to be a big free agent addition. Obviously, there's not many guys left out there anyway. A backup point guard, it's probably the one thing they really don't have right now. And I think if there's any position they'll target midseason, it'll be that.
And Javon is a sneaky big loss.
Yeah.
He was an important player for them.
Yeah, and I think, looking at his career trajectory, I was high on him being... I think there was almost a resistance to having be the true nominal backup point guard, even if he played the one off the bench for them. They didn't put the ball in his hands a ton. I do think he can do it. I really like that contract for Chicago, although he did not have the best playoffs, which is unfortunate. But yeah, they don't really have a clear backup point guard. It sounds like Lindell Wigginton, Canada's own, may get some reps. He's been in their system for about 3 years now. He had a really good year in the G League last year. He had a pretty good summer league. He's developed his shot. He's a good defender at the one. So we'll see if he gets some run. They may also just cede more ball handling to Chris and Giannis and make it less of an issue, which is what I would imagine. They also have Amari Moore, an undrafted two-way player who's a point guard too. And they may add even a third point guard via two-way. So it looks like they're really taking swings at that position. But that's the one. And I think kind of paired with that, I had thought they'd be able to be a little bit under the second apron enough to use the mini MLE. And there were some good like Shake Milton kind of guys going for that. And I was like, ooh, that would be a really fun, backup point. That really, I think then the roster just looks a lot more complete. But with the Brook contract coming out to be more than I think we had anticipated, and not knowing like the way the unlikely bonuses factor in, all this nerd stuff, but they're over it. They were over it before they signed TA Thanasis. So, and it's fine. I don't think it's a huge concern. There are some people that are really like, you need a backup point guard. It would certainly be nice. I think they're probably a little short on ball handling, but I want to see what the new offense looks like. Because are we just going to let Giannis actually kind of handle and run pick and rolls? Like the Giannis Brook Lopez pick and roll has sneakily been pretty effective if you look at the numbers over the last several years, and they just don't do it much. Maybe it won't be as noticeable as we think. I'm not really sure, but I do think that's the one where, yeah, it would be nice to have a little bit more depth than just a couple of two-way guys, even if Wigginton is pretty experienced for a two-way player.
Yeah, no, I do appreciate though that you guys didn't take Craig Porter Jr. Because I'm very glad that he fell to us as an undrafted player.
Listen, every time the Bucks pass on a Porter Jr. and he goes to the Cavs, it works out awesome for you guys. So.
Very well played, Ty. Very well played.
He looks good, though. He looks good.
He does look really good. And you know what else has worked out really well for us? The partnership that we have with Zoom. Support for this podcast and the following message comes from Zoom. 500 million businesses connect using Zoom, a single platform for phone, chat, workspaces, events, apps, and video. Zoom enables real-time collaboration for teams around the globe. Zoom, how the world connects. Ty, really well done. Let's move in to how these teams match up, because I'm disappointed that we didn't get the second round matchup between these two teams. I thought Milwaukee was going to be that team that gave Cleveland the type of series that they got against the Knicks, right? One that doesn't feel good at all. It's a little embarrassing to go through, but you learn from it, right?
We just thought we'd get to have some fun first.
Yeah, we didn't get that. and it's funny because I've been having conversations with people about, like, this is something that the Cavs did need to go through. And they're like, well, they needed to go through the first round loss. I'm like, no, like that didn't need to happen. But the lessons you learn, it doesn't matter whether you learn them in the first round or in the second round, or if you have like a conference finals run and then those weaknesses get exposed. Going through that was the important thing. You just feel better if you win around, right? Like the floor feels a little bit higher. But looking at kind of the Cavs now with the revamped shooting, obviously we saw these teams play 4 times throughout the regular season. We get to see each other a lot. Is there something specific about a matchup between the Cavs and Bucks that does give you a little bit of concern if we were to go into a series, or even looking forward to these regular season matchups?
I mean, with the Cavs, how can it not be related to both the small backcourt and the big front court, right? So I think defensively, having Mobley and Allen on the back line, it does give a team, especially a team like the Bucks, problems that, when your best player is a shooter, but not an efficient shooter who really likes to create havoc at the rim. Having that kind of personnel is always going to kind of flag it as the kind of matchup that, as you mentioned, if you win, you're probably going to win ugly. Like, it's not going to be easy to get points against that team. So I think just having Mobley and Allen against Giannis, and even like Drew, who regular season has shot very well, but also likes to get to the rim. Like, every team likes to get to the rim. Every player does to a certain extent, but certainly the Bucks, that's been an important thing. So I think that defensive backline, and then on the other end, trying to guard both Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland is always a challenge for any team. And I think, you have Drew Holiday, one of the best perimeter defenders in the league. That's a great start. But now with Javon Carter gone and less guard depth, it is going to be intriguing. Like, how do they handle those two guards? I'm really not sure. And again, it's going to be, I remember I actually joked about this on a podcast this week, I think, late in one of his first games when he got back from injury, Bud threw Joe Ingles on Donovan Mitchell in a Bucks Cavs game. And I remember we were just watching it like, what is this? Why would you do what is this real? Are we in a simulation? Like, what is going on? That's clearly not going to happen.
The answer is bullying. That's clearly
that's
bullying.
What happened. That's certainly what happened too. But who else can guard guards well enough on this roster? That's going to be a really interesting thing as well. Like, can Grayson step up and guard a little bit? He was better last year. Obviously, you're not going to look at him though as this is someone we want on Donovan Mitchell or Darius Garland for the whole game. So I think they have unique problems to solve on both ends for any team, but especially for Milwaukee, given the proclivity of scoring around the basket and the lack of size. I guess at the opposite, the lack of small size on the Bucks roster. I'm really intrigued to see how they go about guarding this team. I do think it's going to be a huge matchup for anyone in the East on how they match up with Cleveland, because the Cavs were top 4 last year and I think got pretty significantly better over the offseason.
Yeah, and to that point, like, they also kind of, if they're going to start Strus at the 3, they also kind of stop the hiding spot. That,
exactly.
Part of this, where you can just, if you do have someone you want to just give a break to, that they could just go hang out in the corner and not really guard Isaac Okoro. I do think that's a challenge for Milwaukee, but I still think Milwaukee presents really, really tough challenges for the Cavs. Obviously Brooke is getting long in the tooth, but I think it was No Tech Ben on Twitter who kind of talked about how the Cavs have an advantage at the 4 and the 5 against probably 28 teams, and not against Milwaukee. And then you obviously have Drew, and I think the Cavs are probably thrilled that Javon Carter isn't there to chase their guards over screens and stay connected in that Milwaukee drop coverage. And then, I think Brooke does, obviously Cavs fans are going to remember Brooke absolutely torching the Nets against them in the regular season last year. But I do think, like, even archetypally, he creates a real big problem for them because, when they do have to, send 2 to the rim to help guard, an elite big scorer, normally those guys are so good at getting out and recovering against jump shooters, but Brooke is so big, the release is so high that it's really hard to get out and contest that corner 3. So if he's hitting, it's a really, really tough. He does break their scheme a little bit. This is a team that will give up some corner 3s by collapsing down to the paint, and you just can't get back out on a 7-2 guy like that. So I think it was a really cool matchup all through the regular season where, if you remember those first 2 games, the Cavs were running the Bucks off the floor in the first half of each game, and then the Bucks ran the Cavs right back off the floor in the second half of those first 2 games. So I feel like it was a little bit of a preview of what each team can do to the other to bother them. But I really, really like the matchup for the Cavs, and I remain pretty darn disappointed we didn't get that second round matchup for that reason, because I think they would have learned better lessons in a series against the Bucks than they learned against the Knicks. I think against the Knicks they learned that their offense wasn't functional enough, and that they were bad on the boards and needed to get more physical. I think if they had been more ready and been able to handle a Knicks team that I just still do not think was particularly special. I think this was much more about the Cavs' limitations than the Knicks playing out of their minds good again. Again, the Knicks had the worst offense in the postseason after the Cavs. However, I do think like the Bucks, figuring out how to deal with the Giannis battering ram, figuring out how to score against that drop coverage with Drew coming around the back and staying connected. I just think the Bucks present a lot of cool challenges for the Cavs, and most importantly, they present the how are we going to deal with a top 5 player in a series? Because that is one thing that, like, we talked about this a couple weeks ago. I was talking about kind of what the Cavs' path to a championship team looks like. And, you know, for teams that have top 3 players, it's pretty easy. Have a top 3 player and get enough good players around them. Whereas I don't know if the Cavs currently have a player who I think is going to end up in that top 3, top 5, which means you're going to have to do it by committee, and you're going to have to figure out how to make life really hard and crappy for super duper stars like Giannis. So, you know, like I don't agree with folks who are like, Cavs needed to take a hard lesson anyway. I think their non-readiness kind of cheated them out of better lessons and kind of extended their timeline in that way.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because Brunson played almost like that top 5 player for some of that series, not all of it.
He didn't know. The stats were not good.
I know.
It just feels that way.
Feels that way because the Cavs are scoring The Cavs are scoring 86 points a game.
Did he have like 1 or 2 actually really good games?
He did.
The rest, or
that's
right.
He had a couple really good games. And then
like Jimmy's whole playoff run in one series.
They were a little Steffi though. They're already up 15 in the fourth quarter, hitting a bunch of threes.
Old wounds don't heal, huh?
It was just missing a mouth guard basically.
Let me just say this, Ty.
Hit that hole in one, just swearing like, come on.
Exactly.
The best way to put it is that Jalen Brunson had a better statistical series against Miami in every single category.
Wow.
And it just didn't feel that way.
It just didn't feel that way because the Cavs couldn't score. So so no, I actually don't think that. I really do think like you cheat when you're not ready to. When you lose a series you should have won. It does block you from learning those better lessons because I really think they would have learned a lot from a series against the Bucks or the Heat. Even though I probably would have picked the other teams in each of those series. Maybe not in hindsight. I probably would have picked Cavs against the Heat because we didn't know that they were blessed by Providence.
We didn't know what playoff Max Strus was going to do for them, but he's on our side now. But it's funny, Carter. One, I completely agree with you. I retract my statement. I think you said it in a much smarter way, and I agree with every point you made, as much as it pains me. And the other thing that I didn't fully kind of comprehend is, I think both of these teams, even though the cores are staying together, and you make some minor tweaks around the edges. It's interesting that I think both are going to have to change how they defend the point of attack to some extent, because like you said, Milwaukee still does have Drew, but you don't have Carter, right? Like you don't have kind of that second option.
You don't have me. That's true.
Yeah, you don't have that second option you can go to against a team like the Cavs and say, okay, well, now we have to pick, right? Like Drew Holiday guards either Garland, and we're hoping to take away some of the playmaking, or he's going to guard Mitchell, right, and try to take away, obviously, their leading scorer. And I think we all assume he's going to be the leading scorer next year. And for the Cavs, there's a change, because if we're assuming that Max Strus is going to start, that takes away Isaac Okoro being that point of attack defender. And I think Garland did a very good job last year taking a lot of those point guard assignments last year. I think it kind of went under the radar just how often he would take those assignments. And it looks like he's, added a lot of strength. One of the things
he better add a lot if he's going to have to be the main guy on Drew.
Right. Yeah. On Drew, I think you might even just cycle Strus down or put Donovan on him. But I'm saying in general, like I think Garland's going to have to take a lot of those assignments. But it is interesting that Cavs are probably going to have to play a little more base defense and guard the guy across from you rather than, kind of having that option to go to. Do you think, when you look at this matchup, Ty, is there a specific part of the Cavs roster that you think is vulnerable, and particularly that Milwaukee is well suited to exploit with the Cavs?
Yeah, I definitely think it is just the lack of size 1 through 3. If it is Strus who starts, you mentioned Drew. Of course, Drew is strong as hell. Drew is power forward, strong anyway. But really, it's Chris. And I think the thing about Chris is, like, playoff Chris Middleton, if he is healthy, he'll just kill you if you don't have size on him. I mean, he'll post up and just hit that shot all day. And Strus is a fine positional defender. He's not, he's not an offense-only player. But at, I think, 6'5", that's just going to be an issue for him trying to guard Chris. And I think that's where a series could go from, oh, this is tight, this is grimy, this is hard to win, where there could be some games where Chris is just like, really, there's problems. Then, of course, do you bring back in Okoro and go away from Strus or one of the guards, well, then defensively it gets harder for the Cavs, as you mentioned, where you can kind of either have a roamer who can just wreak havoc, which they'll do with Giannis from time to time. He'll probably be on Mobley most of the time, or just, bring one of your worst defenders out of the actions and not have to worry about them. So I think that's going to be their hardest problem to solve is, okay, there's a player 1 through 3 who's going off, and there's a power forward that we can't really move Mobley away from that much. I wouldn't be surprised. They try to put smaller players on Brook, kind of cheat it that way. We've seen teams do this. The Bucks probably certainly have not taken advantage of that as much as they should have. Teams kind of stashing someone like a power small forwardy guy on Brook, and they just let him stay out there. We'll see if this new coaching staff wants to. I think advantage basketball has been something they've thrown around. I mean, quite honestly, although he's thought of as the defensive player first, the floor spacer second, if there's like a 6'6" guy on Brook Lopez, though, that's barbecue chicken, Ernie. Like they're not gonna guard him. He still has that. He didn't forget. He made an all-star team. He's the Nets all-time leading scorer. All back to the basket stuff. So I think that's going to be their big issue. Is they have the Cavs have the big front court like the Bucks. Then the Bucks' size kind of extends beyond that. Where the Cavs, there's a pretty severe drop off, and it's going to be okay. How do we marry the offense of Strus? And of course, the two guards who are great offensively too. But how can we defend well enough when teams have multiple sides? Because I know, the first answer to who guards Chris if he's going off. Well, Mobley can do it. Certainly, Mobley is the perimeter defender who can do it. But when you're playing the Bucks, it's like, okay, then who guards Giannis? And can Jared Allen do that? And then who guards Brook? It's this cascading thing. So that's what I'm interested to see is, do they have to go more defense? Are they not forced to? That's one of the interesting give and take chess matches of the playoffs is what lineups for the Cavs really work and how can they find that balance against the Bucks?
This has been, I think, probably the single most under-discussed part of what the Cavs did this offseason. Something that the Bucks have never done in Giannis's tenure is ask him to go be a point of attack defender. I mean, obviously, he'll switch. He'll do that sort of stuff. But they have always had, Middleton to throw at wing scorers, Drew to throw at wing scorers, and they have almost exclusively played him next to another big over the course of his career. And I think it's going to be really interesting because there are all these analogs and comparisons between Giannis and Mobley, especially on the defensive end, where this would be uncharted territory for that comparison, because how much utility do you lose with Evan Mobley if you're saying you have to go guard Jason Tatum, you have to go guard Chris Middleton on the perimeter? Is that the best use of Mobley's defensive talents? We know he's an elite defender in isolation, but how is he going to do navigating screens as the primary in those moments? And I'm super fascinated to see kind of how that ends up playing out and whether that's really the best use of him defensively, because as we've seen, Giannis can be a great isolation player. He can be a great switch player, but the Bucks have, created a championship identity on that end by letting him roam and play free safety while Brook plays in a drop and just staying in their shell.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating to see how much that changes this year, because it's funny, the exact flip side of what you're saying is, and certainly Bucks fans, I think Giannis as well, from some of the things he said, I think he would have liked to be a primary a little bit more. I don't think all year. It's one of those, it's like, you play the center until you can't. I think it's that same idea of you play Giannis as the helper until you really need the stop on KD or Jimmy Butler or whoever it is. And it sounded like Giannis wanted to do that a little more.
Well,
so
that was weird. It's like he kind of feels like he's made in a lab to guard Kevin Durant in a closing possession, and there would still be Chris on him. And I'm like, hey.
Chris or Drew or PJ, yeah. Well, and I think it was very frustrating because the bubble series or the post bubble series when they swept the Heat, it was he and Brook guarding Jimmy and Bam, and it's like, okay, your pick and roll just means nothing. Like we're just going to drop, and they just didn't do it this year. And he had the injury, everything else. I think Giannis wants to be a little more involved defensively. I still think there's going to be a lot of him as the roamer. I think that's you have to look at regular season versus playoff stuff. I don't think he should start the 5 ever. I don't think he should be guarding wings all season ever, or even all game maybe, because as you mentioned, even for Giannis, getting over those screens, that's the hard part. when you're that big and that long, it's really hard to get around screens all day. But toward the end of the game, maybe that's when you want to do it more. So yeah, again, that's another balance. That how do you find the right balance? How is the player happy? How is the team, performing at its best? That's something the Bucks actually have to figure out a little bit this season as well. But certainly will be interesting to see, as you mentioned, before Drew was there, it was Eric Bledsoe, for all of his faults, an amazing point of attack defender on guards. Like they've always had guys they could throw at those offensive players, kind of sparing Giannis from doing so. Even if he wishes he did it a little bit more, certainly has made them such a consistently great defense, though, to have Chris and Giannis behind those other defenders.
Yeah, and I've been pretty adamant that that's the role for Mobley moving forward, right? Like he might play minutes at the 5, right? Like you might close with him at the 5, and I shouldn't say might play minutes at the 5. He plays about half of his minutes at the 5, so we know that's going to be part of the game. But I still think the way that you maximize him defensively is having him at the 4, and I think you look across the NBA, the only teams that seem to be able to play defense against what modern basketball is the teams that have these guys at the power forward position, whether it's Giannis, whether it's Jaren Jackson Jr., Mobley, Robert Williams, Draymond, these versatile guys that, someone's taking care of the center responsibilities, and I'm able to be that kind of world destroyer, right? And that roamer. And it'll be interesting to see how the Cavs balance having Mobley as a primary defender and when they have him strictly in that power forward role, because they just don't have the size at the small forward position. And that's definitely something that became very apparent to Carter and myself as soon as we started, like, the gears changed and we started looking at free agency. We're like, wow, there's not really options at the small forward position, which isn't a surprise because, big 3-and-D wings are one of the hardest things to find. But immediately, like I went into Spotrac and I'm like, okay, let's go to shooting guards. Can I find a large shooting guard that maybe fits? And that's how we landed on Strus as probably the best option, even though he doesn't have that size. But they're probably, even though you're not counting on it, you want someone like Dean Wade to kind of return to form, right? The Dean Wade that we saw prior to the injuries, because he's just like one of the few options of a guy that's 6'9", that's shown, hey, he's defended Jason Tatum well. He's defended Kevin Durant well. He's given Giannis some tough minutes at times, although, Giannis is just Godzilla, so that's a little bit difficult. But
it's a tough one.
The minutes typically are tough for you, even if Giannis has a bad game.
Exactly.
Yeah, a little bit of wear and tear on the body there. So you're going to need him to step up. You're going to need Isaac Okoro to take another step forward as well. But in terms of just adding a big wing, it's just they don't become available. It's really hard to find those kind of guys. And who knows, maybe George Niang can be our Boris Diaw and bait Giannis into those mid-range jumpers like Diaw did to LeBron.
Well, it's just funny because I remember, seeing the Cavs offseason unfold. They got Niang first, right? And it was like, oh, I like that. It's certainly not a perfect player, but you can always use more shooting on a team when you have the two bigs who are non-functional three-point shooters, and just the size, as we've talked about, just having more big players who can move a little bit is nice. But I was like, that can't be their 3, right? And then the Strus news came out. It's like, oh, that makes a lot. Then I like this a lot better. It's kind of the same way I viewed the Lakers offseason. Like the first couple moves, I was like, okay, and then the rest of it. And that's the funny thing about the NBA offseason is everything is in pieces, and even like a trade will be in pieces. Like you can love and then hate a trade just by finding out what else. Like everything comes out so incrementally.
Yeah, and the joke here is that all this happens within like 3 hours.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's like, oh, I totally flipped it 4 hours later when they got Strus too.
I was about to say, not everything happens in pieces. The analysis happens all at once,
yeah, exactly.
And doesn't factor in that there is still months left of the offseason at all. We have to react to every single thing like it is a finished product.
The best is draft grades. I feel like I see a new screenshot every week of like some team that absolutely crushed it in a draft. It's like, these guys are terrible. Like I can't think of a good example. I mean, I think it's probably more NFL because they have so many more rounds, but like a draft that totally changes a team's lives for the next decade. It's like, this draft stinks. There has to be a grade though. We have to know right away how you did.
The flip side is there's always one analyst that loves everything your team did on draft night, and I love finding that
And
guy.
you're just eating it up.
I'm eating it up, and I'm also being like, what's his email so I can book him for the podcast? I want a really
I need an hour of this. I need an hour of this right now.
I need you to go long on this and make me feel really good about it. And I'm interested. I'm excited to have Niang on the team. I think he brings kind of a grit to them. I'm still concerned about the rebounding because none of the guys that they brought in really are plus rebounders for their position.
Can I zag there?
Yeah, go for it.
If the Cavs need to go get a rebounding specialist to fix their rebounding, they're never going to do anything. The guys they have on their team need to get better at rebounding.
I mean, you're not wrong. Like, a big part of the problem was 1 through 3, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think a lot of the rebounding failures came down to that, right? Where, whether it's Jaren Allen not necessarily in position, or I think first 2 games of the series, he was in position, right? He had that 14-14 game and whatnot, and it was Josh Hart. It was these other guys coming in rebounding on the perimeter, and who knows, maybe having a 6'5" guard and Ty Jerome is something that will be helpful. But Donovan Mitchell has been a strong rebounder at times. Garland, if he's getting a little bit stronger, he's going to need better. Strus is going to need to, put a body on him and not allow Derek White to go to the rim at late game situations, right?
Yeah. If we're subbing out any of these core guys because they can't rebound, we've got bigger problems. That's kind of the crux of what I'm trying to say.
No, you're completely right. It does need to get better, and I'm almost ready to do a rewatch of that Knicks series, Carter.
Oh, never.
No, I'm getting ready to do a rewatch. I know I'm not expecting you to.
It would be fun. I don't think it would be fun.
Not enough paychecks in the world, brother.
No,
but these are the kind of games that are the worst to lose because it's just like they really shouldn't be. But alas.
I'll watch tape, but I'm not rewatching the series.
Yeah, I'm gonna rewatch it, and I'm not feeling good about it. I want to rewatch the regular season too because I looked it up, and the Cavs offensive rating, like in terms of how teams performed against the Knicks offensively, Cavs were 4th worst against the Knicks in the regular season, and they had that massive game 1 where they just hit every single 3. And I want to figure out what exactly it was about that matchup that just made the Cavs struggle offensively, and I guess 11 matchups, or 9 matchups. All right, great math. Good job, Justin. But I want to figure out exactly what that was. So I'll put myself through that.
Apparently, the Cavs played the next 1 out of every 8 games.
It's like that year where after the All-Star break, we just played Philly 17 times.
That was ridiculous.
I hated that. It was the worst. Let's talk about the rest of the Eastern Conference, though, because we're going long. We're having a lot of fun, but we do need to keep this show moving. Ty, let's get your prediction for what the regular season standings will look like for the Eastern Conference. And you know what? You can go just top 6. So let's ignore the play-in. Let's ignore the teams that are going to be in that mix. Let's talk about your top
I want to
6
preset some ground rules. Are we assuming Dame on Miami, or are we not assuming Dame on Miami?
We're just assuming there's a chance, or it's likely.
Let's factor it in. Let's
factor it in. That's more interesting to me.
I'm gonna say the Bucks hold their spot at 1. I think it's pretty likely they just finish somewhere in the top 3, but I do a Bucks podcast. The Bucks finish 1.
Okay.
It gets honestly, I didn't. It gets really
sloppy
hard from here.
It gets sloppy right away.
It does.
You got a chance to pander here.
No, I'll put in the Celtics still. I'll just retain last year's. I don't like the moves much. I think they manifest more in the playoffs. But I do remember seeing like a Celtics tweet the night of, Celtics person tweet, not the account, but like we're like the worst passing team in the league and we just lost our best passer for a post big. And it's just like, it is going to be difficult to overcome. I think they'll be fine. I mean, the Jays are really good. They'll figure it out in the regular season.
That would be pretty wild if their account tweeted that.
Yeah.
Some really disgruntled social media manager.
Yeah. Just, I mean, with how much Marcus Smart meant to that org, I wouldn't be totally shocked. That would be the trade that would do it. Mm-hmm. I'll give the Cavs 3 though. And I'm not even pandering, but you look at the Sixers, they're just like, I don't know if I could, as someone who really hates the Sixers and has for a long time, I don't know if I could have scripted a funnier way for this all to go down, like this whole thing, than just like they end up with Harden, Morey gets his guy, and then in just the most classic Morey fashion, just completely disregards the relationship, totally lies about giving him the deal after he takes less. And now it's this ugly thing for the second time in 3 years. Embiid has to carry the team with a star teammate sitting out. We're getting uncomfortable. Harden's going to wear just the most tremendous fat suit we've ever seen. They're saving up cap space for some reason. Has no one told them the memo that it doesn't matter anymore? I don't know. But the plan this summer is cap space, baby. We're not extending Tyrese Maxey. That can only end well. So I'm going to say they take a hit. I'm going to say they're not as good. They're still top 6, but we're going to go Bucks, Celtics, Cavs. I'll just throw in the Heat at 4. I don't care what their roster is, to be honest with you. They just feel like they just zigzag from like 8 to 4 every couple of years. Let's say they get Dame, whatever. They're 4.
Okay.
I'll throw the Sixers in at 5, which sets up a hilarious first round. Okay. And then I will probably put the Knicks at 6. If you told me it was the Hawks, I wouldn't be surprised. If you told me it was the Pacers or Magic, I wouldn't be shocked.
Oh, come on.
I wouldn't be shocked.
You're too online.
I like those teams.
That's a
I
too
don't like
online.
The Hawks.
Is it? The Hawks I'm fine with. The Pacers?
The Pacers had a really good summer.
Pacers were
added
good.
children. They added children and Bruce
Pacers were
Brown.
good in the regular season.
Obi Toppin and Bruce Brown.
Bruce is nice. Obi is whatever.
Yeah.
They added the eighth man of another team.
Pacers are defensible because Pacers were outside of the play-in while Hallie was healthy basically all of last year. And I think the roster got a little bit better this offseason.
They had spots in the rotation where it's just like, yeah, that guy should be getting 30 minutes for Westchester. They have real players.
I think you're getting a little too cute. I mean, the benefit of what the NBA is now is you have 4 play-in spots where you can just store all of your cute stories and teams that you like.
That's where I would have. I was limited to 6, so I just shouted them out.
Okay, I respect that.
I think it's a lot more likely they're 7 through 10 than they actually crack top 6. But one weird injury, whatever. I think Orlando's the one where I'm like, listen, I don't think they have enough real players. They were pretty good the second half of the year. And Paolo's one of those guys where, like, if Paolo shows up and is an all-star next year, is anyone shocked?
I think we'll learn a lot about his readiness at the World Cup. Like, is he going to play a bunch of minutes for a Team USA team that's pretty young? Or is he going to be a mid-range guy that doesn't work?
People throw around people throw around just generally generational comps too much, but the KD one for how he plays, I get it. I'm not saying he's going to be that. I get why you would say it. And I know people have talked about, like, that was kind of a turning point for KD, was like Team USA, get that real role. That can really bring a lot of energy. So I think that's a great take, Carter. I agree. I'm not putting Detroit. Everyone loved Detroit last year. I said slow the roll. I'm still not putting them there this year because their roster makes no sense and is bad. But Orlando, I kind of like. Just shouting out Orlando.
I get it as a shout out. Honorable mention.
Yeah, that's it.
I like that Paolo plays like late career Blake, but like without the back issues. It's just if Blake started playing that way, where it's like, I'm just going to really put pressure on the rim. I'm going to draw a lot of fouls here. Got a nice little mid-range game. I love Paolo. I'm so impressed by him. Curveball here. How does your rankings of this top 6 differ from how you feel about those teams come playoffs? Like, if you were to power rank those teams of how playoff ready they are, how would you go?
So throw away all the young teams, the Pacers, don't even care, not even mentioned anymore.
Okay.
I'll still put Bucks 1, blatant homerism.
Yeah.
Celtics, Heat are the next 2. The Heat just shoot up. I mean, we've seen it, right? We've seen it enough times.
If they have Dame, I'm putting them above the Celtics. I might put them above
for playoffs.
Yeah, I don't like the Celtics for the playoffs. I don't like the Celtics at all.
I'm just putting them there, and I'll tell you, it's close. And I know I just said it, but it's close. Tatum a year older and Jimmy a year older factors in here. Where it's just a Dame too. Like, it
also depends how much, like, what moves if they were to pull that trigger, because they lost so much shooting depth already that if Hero and Duncan are going out, then all of a sudden it's like, okay, you lost Bruce, you lost Duncan, you lost Hero, you lost Vincent. Like, Lowry might not be in the mix anymore.
They're really old around
playing with Dame, right?
I'm a big Highsmith fan. I really like his game.
I like Haywood Highsmith.
He doesn't have a shot. Like, that doesn't address my shooting depth.
I get it. Can I make my anti-Celtics take while we're here?
Yeah,
let's do it.
On both. So regular season, I think they have at most 7 like guaranteed NBA roster quality guys, rotation quality guys.
Yeah.
I think 2 of them are going to be hurt at all times.
Okay. Yeah.
And I think if we have learned anything from the last couple years, looking at teams like the Lakers, looking at, all these top heavy teams, having functional depth matters so much more than it ever has. Playing guys who cannot hang kills you in the modern NBA. And even if your top 4, even if 4 of your guys on the court are really, really good, if you're playing a 5th guy who just doesn't really have the juice, that's a huge problem for you. So like it alarms me how quickly I get to Sam Hauser when I'm running through their rotation.
But like,
he seems like
he's
a good
fine.
hang. You don't think he can hang?
He's
He seems like a
he's
chill guy.
10th man.
Pritchard, I think, is kind of good. And that helps me in the math. I think he can
he's
actually
also
play
been
a little
demanding a trade for the last 2 years.
bit. He won the war. Marcus Smart's gone.
So,
somehow
I don't know.
Pritchard won the power struggle there.
I just think, looking at their regular season, I think that they have their wing and guard depth is functionally non-existent. One injury really puts them in a really tough spot. Obviously Jalen and Tatum have been, superheroes of staying healthy, and that's kind of their ace in the hole. But I think people kind of have these fallacies when they look at injury luck, where it's like, well, that guy got hurt, so the other guys probably won't get hurt. You have that fallacy where it's like it is just as likely that Williams and Porzingis are both hurt at the same time than it is that neither of them are hurt.
Yeah, and they have, at least they have 45-year-old Al Horford. To step in when that
and
happens.
Horford is getting to that age where any season he might not be good anymore. I remember when it happened with David West, who was helpful. You can't play anymore. And so I just look at all the reasons. With evaluating these teams, I feel like you always have to kind of do the what's your median outcome. And their median outcome is still pretty darn good, but their it goes wrong outcome is so much. The floor is so much lower than it was just a year ago.
Mm-hmm.
I don't disagree. They stocked up all these 2nd round picks. I feel like they're going to add some depth as the season goes. But I also just do we live in a world that good things happen and the Celtics aren't good? I doubt it. I feel like
I know. Maybe this is some wishful thinking because I do hate Boston.
I don't think you're totally off though. I think they're not even worst case, right? All their play, their bad case is not very good for them. I do think it's kind of fascinating what they did, and I think that's the part that I don't know if I like for them is that they were so close with that core, and to break it up for Porzingis and then pay him, I just think it's
I just think Porzingis had
like that.
Yeah, Porzingis had a lot of fun playing really low stakes basketball last year. That is what I would
never
say.
done anything but that.
He had a couple really great playoff games before he got hurt. I do think that's the kind of the case. I really remember that against in that Clippers series with the Mavs. He looked really, really good. He was legitimately presenting a problem for them. And at his best, he's a really helpful player, and I'm really high on the best version of Porzingis. I'm just man, it just feels like you're betting a lot on him being a no doubt really good 3rd best player. At the level of investment they made in him, he needs to probably be one of the 2 or 3 best 3rd wheels in the league. Is he that? I don't know about that. And if you're going to be a top heavy team, he kind of needs to be that.
I really worry about their playmaking because I think in modern NBA basketball, you need to have 2-3 playmakers, and they need to be you need to have them in multiple positions too, right? You need to have that front court playmaker, and I think Jason Tatum's probably their best bet to take a leap in that area. But I just feel so bad about their guard depth there when it comes to playmaking. That was one of the issues with the Cavs in the playoffs, right? Was you had Garland and Mitchell, but Mobley wasn't ready to do that yet at the playoff level, and it looked like he was thinking a little too much relative to even how he played in the regular season. So I think that's my biggest concern for them. But
I just realized I completely
after 3.
derailed Ty's list.
Oh, that's fine. I remember.
That's the format of this, right? It's just an excuse for us to sit around and talk
Fire
hoops.
off
So
takes.
continue, Ty.
The Strus edition helps with that. I mean, I think the shooting is probably the biggest thing he adds, but just greasing the wheels offensively it'll be really nice too. He clearly knows how to do that.
Yeah.
Bucks, Celtics, Heat. I'm not changing. I heard Carter. I'm keeping mine though.
That's fine.
I don't trust that good things will happen.
Okay.
And then Knicks, Cavs, Sixers.
Why Knicks above Cavs? I have to ask the question, even though I think I know the answer.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I'm a Luddite in certain senses when it comes to the league, and it's just like I just saw it to such a degree. Thanks. I think the Cavs are better, but it's just like I'm gonna need to see them not just like defeat, like that we won the game. I want to see them bully the Knicks for some games before I start to reevaluate that. So it's not as much like analysis. Like I love the Dante ad. I don't. I kind of think it's not great for them. And it's like, get over the Nova thing. It's just weird. You had a CIA thing. Now you have a Nova thing. Like just find players. They don't all need to have, this isn't hoop grids. Like just add good players. I don't think they're really needed in.
Did you come up with that on the spot, or have you used that one before?
No, I came up with that.
That's a great line.
Thank you.
That's a great line.
It's so weird to me. But whatever, it's fine. But like, I mean, as much as we all thought Tibbs was cooked, they're really well coached and they're keeping the team together. I think they're good. They could also randomly end up with Joel Embiid one of these days. I'm not factoring that in. Who knows? Mm-hmm. They're clearly trying, and that's, they looked at Thanasis. I wonder why, right? Like we all know what the Knicks' plan is. It's to turn Julius Randle into a real All NBA player, not a Julius Randle All NBA player. But even just with him and Brunson and everything, they're deep. They got a little deeper, I think. Even though I didn't like giving away Toppin, they're relatively young. They're well coached, and they just did it to such an extent versus the Cavs that I need to see I need to see like, okay, they learned it. Like Mobley develops, Strus is the missing piece, Niang's shooting helps, and they can prove it to me in the regular season. I don't need to see it in the playoffs, but I'm just giving the Knicks the benefit of the doubt. And then the other three teams ahead of all of them, I just think those are the three teams by and large. And then Philly, I win two's playoff series once with an MVP and all these other All-Stars, just one time.
I like the hating. I understand why you have to do it. I understand why you put the Knicks ahead of us. And I understand as a fan, as much as I want to object, as much as I want to jump down your throat, we have to take this. It just is what it is now, and we'll see. I have full confidence in the fellas and the boys. But
it's worth noting, Ty had to go through this too. Like when the Bucks were losing series, they shouldn't lose. You had to go through the, well, we're just gonna have to see it happen, or we're not gonna pick the Bucks.
Well, the results drive everything. I had Cavs in 5 going into the series.
So did I, buddy. Me and you were the only two.
Yeah, I had Bucks in 4 going into our first round series, so don't go with my first round takes. But
it's happened sometimes against Miami, right? Like sometimes Miami has the Bucks numbers. Other times, they lose in 4 and
all haymakers. They're all 4 or 5.
Didn't Jimmy get outscored by Bryn Forbes in a series, or who was it?
Yeah, it was Bryn. I wish it was some Bryn really ugly thing since. I wish it was anyone else, but yeah, Bryn Forbes outscoring Jimmy is very, very funny. And well, it's like, to the results point, like Jokic is everyone's number 1 now. And 2 years ago, Giannis is everyone's number 1. I'm not going to sit here and argue against Jokic as your number 1. Like, look what he just did, right? Like Kawhi in 2019, he's never won MVP, but that's the guy. Like when you go prove it in that level, I'm fine giving the benefit of the doubt. I'm not saying I have Jokic over Giannis. I am saying everyone putting him there, it doesn't bother me at all, because of course we just saw it. And I think it's fine, even if it's simple, to just be like, yeah, if you just did it, you deserve that respect going into the next year.
Yeah, I think that's completely fair. And Giannis and Jokic right now, that's my top 2. Like that's my tier number 1 when it comes to NBA stars. I think it's those 2, and everyone else is trying to get on that level. So
and then it's a 3-way tie for you, Mitchell, Garland, Mobley.
Yeah,
at the next tier. Yeah,
of course. Yeah.
I've tuned into this podcast.
You know me well. And Jared Allen's just, he's peeking his way right into that group.
He's number 1 on the most improved leaderboard for you going into the year. That's the Allen place. Or no, number 2, Mobley, I guess makes more sense.
Oh, you know what? It might even be Garland. Just you wait, baby. Just you wait, baby. I'm riding that trade hard. I'm a big believer that we got another leap coming here. But we have gone really long on this. You know what? Sorry. I don't feel bad about going long on this either, because this is such an NBA dead time. I was sitting there trying to work all
You're
day.
Welcome, everyone. Bill Simmons is on vacation. JJ Redick's on vacation. Not the working men of the Chase Down podcast and the Gyro Step. I'll tell you what.
No. Yeah, you know what? We went long. We gave you some content. Let's give a little more content, Carter. Start the clock at 60 seconds of Sea Bears time.
And start the clock.
My Sea Bears update for you is nothing but heartbreak. Winnipeg showed out in the final game of the regular season with a record-setting crowd, ensuring that the 6 largest crowds in CEBL history are all owned by Winnipeg. It was a back-and-forth game Saturday against Edmonton, with the good guys coming back and building a 6-point lead in the fourth quarter. Sadly, that vanished before target time even began, with Isaiah Osborne knocking down 3 straight triples, and the Stingers pulled away with a 98-86 victory. This means, despite tying for the best record in the West, Winnipeg lost the tiebreaker against Calgary and falls all the way to the 3 seed because Vancouver gets a bye to the championship weekend for hosting the weekend. Winnipeg will try to get their first home win against Edmonton this year, Friday in the play-in game, and then they have to get their first win on the road versus Calgary 2 days later just to make it to the championship weekend. Instead of hosting one game to head to Vancouver, they have to go on the road, but it is what it is.
Wow.
60 seconds, I got it in, and we got a little bit of bonus gripes here. Wisconsin Herd legend, AJ Hess. AJ Hess brought in
this is what the people came to the pod for.
From the Herd. Ty,
this is the one thing about it I teased on Twitter. So there is like one person out there who probably did tune in for this.
Yeah, you know, Ty got me all excited when the signing came in. I'm like, man, he played for the Herd. He's like, you got yourself a shooter. Carter, you know what his splits are for the year?
Oh, tell me about it, brother.
Shooting 33% from the floor and 30% from 3.
A real Davis Bertans type of fool's gold.
Set shots, money, movement shooting, not his bag. Not ideal. It hurt.
I'll tell you what, there might have been a reason he didn't get up to the Bucks.
Yeah, I don't think he was really a starter if memory serves either. But I looked back, I thought of him as like this shooter when I messaged you, and I looked at the stats later, and I think he was like 33-34% with the Herd too, and I was like, oh,
listen,
that's what he does.
We talked about downgrading Marjan Beauchamp's crossover stats and prorating. Yeah. I think you got to prorate, add a couple percentages, going to the CEBL. So yeah, he was a hell of a shooter. He's just letting Justin down.
Well, I saw in the second league in France. The second league in France, he shot like 45% from 3 this past season. So maybe it's the Sea Bears that are the problem.
No, it's just the level of competition. It's the level of competition, and it's those record-setting crowds, man. First year in the league, and we have the top 6 attended games in the history of the league. We're
Winnipeg knows ball.
We know ball. Now we have to play a play-in game with the best record in the West. I hate this.
We got to do a watch party or something, Justin. No, you're going to be there. Well, yeah, I guess you're going to no, it's not a home game.
It is a home game.
Oh, it is a home game, so you're going to be
home
there.
game and then road game, which is a very weird plan.
Yeah, we got to go head out on the road.
Sunday you can do the watch party, hopefully.
Yeah,
brother.
Well, you better tune in, Carter, because CEBL Plus is free. Just register with your email.
Absolutely, buddy.
Ty, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and indulging us and going long and hanging out. We really appreciate it. Everyone that tuned in, I hope you guys enjoyed it. Make sure that you guys are subscribing to the Gyro Step Podcast Network. Anything else you want to plug before we get you out of here, Ty?
No, man. All the links are at gspn.info to anything. Appreciate anyone who checks us out. But thank you guys so much for having me, for accommodating my long talking. It was a ton of fun, as it always is. So very, very, very great time here, as always, on the Chase Down.
God bless you.
Just 3 long-winded, long talkers. Big thanks to everyone that tuned in on YouTube and hung out with us throughout this whole thing. Make sure you like and subscribe. Click the notification bell so you know when we're going live. If you're listening via podcast and you want to support us, leave us a rating, leave a review, subscribe, unsubscribe, resubscribe, and help cook those books. If you want to be part of the Chase Down's exclusive Discord chat, send a screenshot of that review to chasedownpod@gmail.com. However you choose to support us, we really do appreciate it. Make sure you guys are staying safe out there. Until next time, go Cavs.